Welcome to AI in Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design. I'm Dan Saffer.
And I'm Nick Martellero, and we're faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute. Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right at the intersection of these fields.
Whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner interested in design, we're glad you're here. We had a deep dive episode last week, so we missed a lot of news that came out. So this week, we're doing one of our hot takes episode, where we rip through a ton of news articles, give you a sense of what the big ideas are, and then riff on them for a few minutes, and then bang, we're off to the next topic.
We'll be doing 10 hot takes on everything from agent behaviors to Claude phishing.
But before we get into it, quick word about something we're doing at the HCII. Every conversation with industry partners right now is about AI. Every single one. Product leaders want to know where AI actually creates value, which bets are worth making, and which ones aren't. And these aren't new questions. The HCII has been working on them for over 30 years. AI just happens to be the technology of the moment. But many companies are moving so fast to ship that nobody gets to just explore what AI is good for. That's what the MHCI capstone is for. You get a semester with an interdisciplinary team of graduate students and faculty to chase and explore a new area. And you don't walk away with just a slide deck. You walk away with the working prototypes, design systems, and documentation that your team can build on. If your organization wants to sponsor a capstone project, please reach out. The link is in the show notes.
All right, so let's start out with a hot take from friend of the podcast, MC Dean, who has an article called Everyone's Work is Starting to Look the Same. And this article is basically MC Dean's musing on the fact that there is a lot of discussion out there that language models and AI seem to make everyone's look feel the same. It makes design look feel the same. It is a reduction to the mean. And there is a lot of evidence that is suggesting that people who utilize AI to generate ideas are actually less creative. The ideas are more homogeneous. But interestingly, MC Dean's take is actually that, I don't know, it's really not that bad. It's not like it's collapsing the entire industry, but actually that it's maybe about as bad as a bad team brainstorm session where you just get homogeneous ideas, which, Dan, I've been in plenty of those before.
Right. There's no bad ideas in a brainstorm session, except there usually are. And yeah, I think what is true about this is that, yes, it is true. We're definitely seeing this. And right, she's saying, does it really matter? Why are you spending your time worrying about some of the stuff that just looks the same when instead you should probably be thinking about those really hard, really weird, really challenging problems that can't look that way or shouldn't look that way, or just resist fitting into one of these flattening paradigms. And so I think this is in some sense a wake-up call to, yeah, this is happening, but it's also like, don't panic. Spend your time elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that we see over and over as new design trends come into fashion. There are patterns that emerge and paradigms, and those paradigms are useful. I mean, I think sometimes we look at a paradigm as like, oh, we've got to break the paradigm. We have to do something different. Oftentimes when we're thinking about product design, we probably want to fit a lot of things in a paradigm, except for, say, the value that our product creates. And a lot of that is actually in the user experience area of work as opposed to the UI area of work, right? As someone who's actually working on a product right now, I'm completely fine using the average user interfaces that my users are going to understand immediately. They're going to be able to work with immediately, such that they can actually have the experience with my product that actually delivers the value that they're looking and paying for.
I think that's a very good perspective. Okay, first hot take. Done. Our next hot take is from an author named Sean Gadecki, who is a software engineer at GitHub. And he writes a lot about shipping software and working inside big tech. And he has his own hot take here about how LLMs reward expertise, whereas typically we think about LLMs as the great equalizer, that anyone can type a prompt and get a great app or get a good outcome from it. He's saying the opposite is actually true, that the more that you know about a domain, the more you're going to be able to get out of the model. And the most important prompting skill is actually your personal domain expertise, not just how well you phrase it. And I really like this take. I think it's great. I think it is counterintuitive, but again, like MC Dean's, makes a lot of sense. Where it's, well, of course I can recognize bad output or propose alternate approaches or know the best way to frame it if I know the knowledge that the LLM is also going to know about my area of expertise. I think that's an interesting take.
Yeah, and this is something that I feel like I've seen before, where people who are experts utilizing these systems are able to, as actually the author here says, push the model further because they understand what's going on underneath this domain, and they can call out when something is wrong and get it into a better space. So, I mean, I generally agree with this. One of the things here, though, is that there is a good comment on this, which is that if you don't have domain knowledge, you can cling to the LLM to at least get something. And that's not bad. And actually, I think for a lot of what we do, again, maybe to the last point, there's a lot of times where I am okay with the average something or the generic thing that comes out because it isn't, say, the value differentiator. It's not the thing that I really care about. And I just need it to be good enough, right? A very satisfying way of looking at stuff. Whereas if know something within the domain area and I'm using it, I want to be able to push it further. And that's really where, of course, your expertise is going to lead to better results. So yeah, I think here, this is something where the question, though, also does come up. How much do our experts or ourselves need to work with the system and learn how to actually prompt in a good way, right? I'm not sure that ability to prompt well seems to be reducing more and more as the models get better and they basically get trained to understand people's intent better. But I do still feel like there's a mix of you have deep expertise and you are understanding something about how to work specifically with these types of AI models.
He does say this in the article. The quote that I really like is that the human is the bottleneck, not the model anymore. The hard part is communicating what the solution is that you want. And experts are just probably going to be better at that. I will say one caveat to what you're saying. I mean, usually that average output is fine unless it's wrong, right? Or unless it is detracting from my message or what I'm trying to do in ways that are subtle or distracting or incorrect. Here's my own hot take about my hot take is that one of the things I'm really hating on now is seeing all these new cartoons and stuff popping up in articles that are clearly all AI generated and they're not adding anything. They're just there. And it is just a distraction. And the art isn't super well done. They're cartoons or little drawings and things, but they're not adding anything either. They're more of a distraction. So
I mean, people love their clip art and it's never going to change, right?
It's sad. It's sad. All right. While we were gone, 2 announcements came out that were pretty big. The first is a properties panel and annotations in Figma Make. So we've talked extensively on this podcast about the canvas to code crossover back and forth. So now Figma Make, the so-called code part of Figma, it's getting 2 non-prompting ways to edit the AI generated code. It brings up that properties panel that you can use then to do spacing or type or layout directly in Make, or you can do Annotations let you mark a region, describe the change in plain language, make this section feel calmer, or make this section brighter, whatever it is for the agent to execute. And I think, once again, a really interesting weaving between the two things. I wish they would have shown something like this at Config a month ago. Maybe this wasn't ready, but I'm here for it.
Yeah. So am I. I mean, I'm very much these kinds of features. Is actually one of the features of, say, Claude Design that I thought was really good was the tweaks panel, where you could actually adjust things. This is actually, I think, a little more precise even than the tweaks panel. And then, of course, annotations is great. This is how we naturally work in a Figma file, where I'm leaving comments for someone, especially if I'm not going in and changing something. If I'm giving feedback to one of my fellow designers, I'm not going to go in and make those changes. I'm just going to leave a comment and then allow my colleague to make the best choice on how to update something. And so I think it's a really natural way of working. The other thing too is I really like the ability to go through and make a bunch of annotations and then say, okay, now go kick off and work on it, as opposed to a one by one. Okay, let's fix this. Okay, let's fix this. Because when I do that, it's this weird, chunky workflow that I don't like. Whereas if I'm in the mode of let me give critique, let me give the feedback, let me go and annotate it and save it all. And I guess arguably you could just do this by not hitting enter on the prompt, but there's something about just being able to drop it right next to the element. And then I hope and assume that there's something there where the annotations are helping to focus the context of the model on that specific part, which I actually think is really important, as opposed to trying to convey that in language.
The next thing that came out at the end of July was ChatGPT Work, which was basically their answer to Claude's Cowork. And the writer and programmer Shlak Khomeini did a really good teardown of the decisions that led to ChatGPT Work. And the article goes pretty deep into memory, scheduling, browser control, and what that means for designing agents like this. And what I really dug about this article was it thinking about proactivity. And this is one of the things that we saw earlier in spring with Claudebot, where it was taking actions on your behalf without your say so. And while we thought that was pretty scary because there was not a lot of guardrails on it, it's interesting to think about that as an interaction model where it is not always me type, tell you what to do, but instead agents saying, hey, I'm looking at your calendar and email and I understand these preferences that you have. So what if I just go and do this for you? Or what if I suggest to do something rather than me, the user, always having to do that? And so I think because the guy who did Claudebot is now at OpenAI, I wonder how much of this has been influenced by that philosophy. But I think it's a really interesting space. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of this. And I think we also just need to start figuring out what the guardrails are for things like this. How much proactivity do you really want to give to your agent?
Yeah, the proactivity angle here too, I think is pretty important for the future of these applications, because if you start to figure out what works well with a new AI system, oftentimes you can get stuck in the local maximum of here's what it does well and this is what I do. Actually, the problems that the Amazon Alexa had was that people figured out what worked really well, and then they only ever did that, which was mostly play music, set a timer, look something up. But other than that, they never did anything else with it for the most part, even though they continually were adding Amazon skills and all these new features and abilities to do stuff. You could write apps to do cool things with it, but no one ever really did this stuff. Part of it is because there's no interface to help you understand what you can do.
Right. There's no discovery. That's easy. You have to go to the app. You have to look through a directory of skills, those kinds of things.
And so I think here, the idea that these agents can actually look at the connections you have to your different software. In the case of the article, they're showing connections to Gmail, connections to Notion, connections to GitHub, and to suggest things. I think that that's actually a really good way for these work-based applications to get more people to use them and to understand what they can use them for, while also delivering, hopefully, a lot of value. But I think that getting this right is going to prevent people from falling into that localized maxima. This is what I use it for, and I only use it for that because I know it works.
This leads us into something else that came out recently, which is an open standard called Agent Behavior. That's all about writing behavior specs, basically markdown files that document how an agent is supposed to act across a whole execution path and not just the final answer. And this was pretty interesting because it's less about setting goals and more about how I want you to go about doing this thing, or how I'm going to evaluate what you are trying to catch, that like agent drift over time, what gets prioritized, how much runtime to do. Those kinds of things I think are pretty interesting. So the idea behind agent behavior basically is to judge agents on process level evaluation instead of just outcomes alone, and doing it via markdown files, just like we do with design.md files.
I will say that to me, this seems a little funny because effectively what it is you are programming your agent, and you're doing it in a way with natural language as opposed to, say, a actual programming language. And there are other systems to basically help you coordinate an agent-based system and actually program it in. There's Python libraries for this stuff. At the same time, I mean, this could be really beneficial to people who don't know that, and they're not going to, say, get an agent to write it. This is more inspectable, maybe, and understandable for people. So I don't mean to throw shade on it from the perspective of like, it seems like what you need is a programming language for behavior. But this could actually be really nice for people to try and see, especially because sometimes there's elements of the behavior where you want it to be a little more flexible. And this is one of the powers of working with language model-based systems, is that they aren't such fixed rules. They are a little more flexible and a little more context dependent. And so this might be an easier way to do that stuff.
It's an open standard suggestion, clearly. So who knows if it'll be adopted? I think it's an interesting idea.
Our next story is about measuring the UX of AI. And this is a cool methods piece on how to actually quantify user experience with AI chatbots, or arguably you could think about other AI-based experiences, pairing standard UX instruments with AI-specific constructs. So in the article, they talk about a number of different scale items that you could incorporate into your UX measurement procedures. These include questionnaires on AI productivity, AI trust, AI dependency, AI anxiety, AI personification, and early adoption. I like seeing measurement tools that people are sharing openly. It's nice to have something that we might be able to utilize even within our own companies and our own products across changes, so that we can see what's making a difference in the areas that we are trying to make a difference in. So I think this is really nice. I think that it also makes a lot of sense from, say, other UX measurement tools, which might just be about, are you able to complete your task, or are you able to do something quickly? This speaks a little more to the experience that you have with an AI.
Yeah, what I think is cool about this is exactly that, where often we're measuring, how many steps or what's your flow? And this is actually looking at some other things, because that stuff is very hard to measure about nebulous tasks that you could be doing with a chatbot. Even if you gave everyone the exact same task, they may phrase the question differently, or they may ask different questions. And it could be extremely challenging to do things in a very traditional sense. And by do things, I mean measure things. So having things like trust and anxiety and personification, these are really interesting new metrics to start considering when we're talking about measuring the effectiveness of the things that we build.
Yeah, I hope to see more people come out with their own measurement strategies, and we see other folks actually post them online, provide them out in an open way. I will say that the authors here, they're not claiming that this is the be all end all. They say, we actually need to probably run a variety of different questionnaires with people and start seeing if these are actually measuring what we want them to measure, what we think they measure. But again, I think it's a great start, and I think getting it out there for people to try is worth it.
Our last three stories are kind of a theme, and they're a little bit anti-AI, or at least some anti-AI output or anti-AI behaviors. And the first one is a story around that type designers at Senda and Abruzzo and the Copenhagen foundry Playtype have come out with a font that, quote, poisons AI called Shield Font. Shield Font, it's an open source typeface. It looks normal to human readers, but it also quietly rewrites words in the underlying source, so it corrupts the text that AI scrapers ingest. And I thought this was an interesting solution to this problem. We saw a couple weeks ago there was a type that came out called Ghost Type that was trying a similar thing, but it was making type that was an illusion that was very hard to read. This type is actually very easily human readable, but it is just changing the type in the background for the machines. And what I thought was interesting around this article and this typeface was that they're like, hey, we're not anti-AI. Instead, we're anti-no consent. If we say, hey, great, you can have our content, here it is, that's perfectly fine. But just because you're publishing something does not mean that you're giving consent for an AI to scrape it. And so that was the thought behind this. And I think this is a really interesting experiment. And I was immediately trying to think, well, could I use this for things so that my students aren't giving AI their homework to prompt and stuff like that? Are there ways that I could use this in my own teaching work? I don't know. What do you think about this one?
I thought this was an interesting strategy for individuals to try to take more control over how their content is being consumed by AI systems. We've seen different things like this crop up. Actually, it reminds me a little bit of a research paper that came out a few years back on makeup that you could put on so that face recognition cameras would not be able to recognize you. It actually was modeled off of the Dazzle camouflage of actually, I think, World War I era ships. And it works pretty well. Basically, the computer facial recognitions wouldn't be able to place who you are. I will say that, though, you're also going to walk around looking like David Bowie all the time. But there's all these experiments that are providing people with some type of shielding against a digital system scraping their information, scraping their data, especially without consent. And I think that there could be really good uses for this. I mean, I also think that this could also be utilized as I'm doing this because I want to identify myself. The one potential negative impact of this, and I wonder how you would handle this, is if you were to say, write your essay and put it online, utilizing this font, humans read it, that's awesome. But the AI still scrapes it. Actually, the whole idea is that it scrapes the wrong stuff and it poisons the AI. But if it's still associated with you, then it might be misattributing things to you or saying things about you. So for example, Dan, if you had, say, written some of your Medium posts in this font, but then I said, hey, what does Dan think about this thing? And Google then goes and it's scraped all that stuff, but just scraped the wrong stuff. And then I believe, well, Dan said this and this, and I never look it up. So I do worry a little bit about that externality that I'm not sure I saw discussed entirely.
Yeah, I think there are potential negative side effects of this. It would be interesting if Medium said, okay, we're applying this to everyone's site now unless you opt out, or maybe you can't even opt out. We're just applying this so that no one's stuff gets scraped. Now that I think is a more challenging situation, which actually brings us to our last two pieces, talking about some anti-slop measures that have been happening. The first of these is LinkedIn has a new anti-slop button that is letting users flag posts as AI slop. And the piece, which is by Grace Snelling in Fast Company, talks about this is basically outsourcing moderation to users while also training their own detectors for this. And while I think that's true, I also think it is interesting, but the question is, I guess, what happens when I do flag something as AI slop? Is that affecting it in the algorithm? For example, if a bunch of people flag something as AI slop and it's not, is that going to tank a LinkedIn post that I spent a lot of time on and wrote? Could this be used for ill? Basically like a downvote on people on Reddit, for example. So that's one thing that's happening in the anti-slop brigade. Nick, what do you think about this one?
I mean, again, I think that this is an interesting way to give end users some control or a feeling of control in like, oh, I can mark this thing as slop. You bring up a good point. Other social media platforms have had downvote buttons and they've used them. And downvotes are an imperfect solution to a very hard problem. And I think that this has some of the same challenges, but at the same time could work out fine. It can be a good enough solution. I mean, I personally would like to have this so that I can say, hey, I don't like this. I mean, I do go in and, for example, I will start blocking people or just don't suggest this anymore to me. I will say that this is a pretty hidden feature as well. It's behind a menu. It's not right there front and center. There isn't an AI slop quick tap thing. So people still have to really make a conscious effort to do this.
And it doesn't become visible when you do, like, there's no indicator on a post that, hey, a lot of people think this is AI slop.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what the data plays out. How often do people use this? The goal here, I think, though, might be less about people actually going in and doing this and more about trying to get behavior change in the writing population on LinkedIn to say, hey, you could get AI slop buttoned. And so how many people will actually say, oh, I don't want that to happen to me, so I will not post AI slop anymore? Will we just see a reduction in AI slop because even the threat of being slop buttoned is the deterrent?
And we're seeing this in the book publishing world right now, where everything is being registered as AI generated, where books that were written 100 years ago are like being said, oh, this is 67% AI generated. And it's like, no, this book was written in 1825. This is not AI generated. Will we start seeing that kind of witch hunt mentality? Because now you will be voted down to oblivion or get a lot of negative comments on your Amazon or your personal pages. If there's even a sense that you used AI in it, yeah, I think it's probably going to do what you said, Nick. I think people may not post or post a lot less frequently because they don't want to be AI buttoned out of existence.
I read an article the other day where some people on the comment boards were saying, this seems like AI slop. And the person actually wrote a little addendum that was, hey, this is not, I wrote this. I do use AI to sometimes help me with some clarity stuff, but this is still my thoughts. And this is also just how I write. To your point on the book from 1825 being cut, it's in the training set, right? Of course it's going to sound
Right.
AI because that's what the training set was. The other thing too is that the more people read this stuff, and it is AI generated or it's been AI edited, the more people will all start to drift their language towards those things, towards those styles and patterns. And so I also wonder if younger people are going to start sounding more like what we think AI sounds like today, because that's everything they've started to read. And so they think this is how you write.
I will say, I know for myself that I find myself deliberately writing things that are not AI, like that I know that AI would not phrase them that way. And I know a lot of other people are doing this too, that are writing weirder, that are getting rid of things that they use all the time, like M dashes. I saw a picture that Jeffrey Zeldman posted of someone at a conference with a footnote on one of the slides that said all of the M dashes in this presentation are human generated. And it's the craziness.
So the thing here is, how are we going to start seeing this also play out in other areas, other applications? Is this going to become a pattern where there's always going to be an AI slop downvote button? And then what is it going to mean for designed interfaces?
I mean, is anyone going to stop using an app because they think it's AI generated, or some of the code is AI generated? Or this gets us back up to MC Dean's article at the beginning of the show, where it's, everything is looking the same because, a lot of these patterns that are coming in from AI, they're starting to appear all over the place. Are people going to stop using an app because it's AI generated? I don't know. I mean, I think this question goes back to value. If I get value from an app or a piece of art or a book or a post, does it matter if it's AI generated or not? I think it matters if it's valuable or not.
And I think that that's where maybe a distinction needs to lie, which is AI generated doesn't have to equal AI slop. Arguably, the slop is the thing we have the problem about. It's the low value aspect of something that potentially isn't very good. It doesn't work, right? Is it slop if it works? Is it slop if it's a good idea?
And I think the answer is no. But if it misleads, if it distracts, if it's more difficult to convey the message that is coming across, and I feel like that is a negative. That's when it becomes slop. Now, our last story here is talking about Substack. So Substack launched their own anti-AI slop initiative. It's integrating Pangram, which is a famous AI detection tool, directly onto its platform. And what it basically does is that readers can click under the 3-dot menu. They could say, hey, scan for AI text. And then the Pangram software analyzes the text and says, hey, this is AI written or AI not. And Pangram, we should note, is one of those things that is, yes, this Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that's definitely 67% AI written. Well, no, it's not. Pangram is definitely not 100% accurate, not even close. Now, on the other side, there are tools for writers. So a writer can say, hey, I can fill out a field when I post something to Substack that details my creative workflow, whether they wrote it by hand or use AI or whatever it is. You can say how I make this. You can also run the Pangram classifier on your own draft posts to see how the system evaluates it. And here's the killer catch, is that Substack allows writers to manually disable AI detection on individual posts. So if a writer disables it and a reader tries to scan it, they'll say AI detection unavailable. And really, the question is, by disabling this, am I basically admitting, yes, this is all AI generated? I think that's the case here. Whether or not that is true, even if I'm like, hey, I don't trust Pangram to detect this, I wrote it all myself, and I don't want the anti-AI backlash against me, so I'm just going to turn off disable AI detection, which seems sort of reasonable. But I don't know. This has caused a lot of consternation to many, many people online over the last week.
Well, yeah, especially because Substack is specifically a platform for writers. And so adding these tools in some ways is antagonistic to the user population.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't know about that. It'll be interesting to see.
Particularly for non-native English speakers who are saying, hey, they tend to use formal phrasing that mirrors what LLMs are actually producing, or they have to use LLMs to help clean up their language because they're not native English speakers. So it biases people against their work.
One of the things that I've been thinking about in regard to human-created artifacts is that we already see within the creator economy that there's value to showing process alongside the actual outcome. So for example, if you're an independent artist and you are trying to sell your products on social media, there's a huge value in actually showing little shorts and pictures of you making your art, right? In the studio, painting or sculpting, beyond just saying, hey, and here's the final beautiful thing that one of you should buy. Part of it is because it builds up a following and people can enjoy and share your work even without having to be the one person who maybe buys that piece. But secondly, it adds a layer of authenticity to the work, right? This is not a mass-produced item. This is a handcrafted item, and I'm proving that by showing it. And I almost wonder now if are writers going to have to sit there and live stream themselves while they're writing and maybe show, hey, this is how I use AI. I'm using it to do some clarification. I'm using to do some spell checking and things like that. But really, these are all my ideas. In the design side of the world, are you going to have to sit and live stream how you work if you are trying to really show that this is human made or that there's a real deep human element here and that it isn't AI slop?
Do people care if their apps are human crafted? I don't know. Probably some people do, and probably some people don't, or won't ever even notice that. As long as they're getting value out of it,
and as long as I think that it's not slop in the truest sense of the word, of it doesn't work or there's something bad about the user experience.
Right. I mean, if it feels that it is helping me achieve whatever goals I have, and I'm having a pleasurable experience reading it or using it or watching it, it seems like that should be the bar. Now, I also think that a lot of these tools, there's no nuance to them, right? There's slop or completely human. There's nothing in between. And I think that is also a big sweeping brush where there's definitely some AI assisted books, music, podcasts, whatever it is. I mean, we use AI to help edit this podcast. Is this AI slop? No, but it is AI assisted. I am not hand editing, or you're not hand editing every single and out of here. We have AI tools that find and get rid of that for us. Does that mean we need to flag this as an AI podcast? That doesn't feel right. We're both human beings here talking, so hopefully that counts for something. But someone would be like, you're using AI to edit? Come on, that's inauthentic. We only like human editors here. Yeah, so this whole thing has actually a funny name to it, which is cloud fishing. It is a term that the kids are using these days. That's a riff on catfishing, for passing off entirely machine-generated content as authentic human-conceived work. So cloud fishing is your new term for the week. And that brings us to the end of the episode. So we'll be back next week with no cloud fishing, but we'll be back with more AI, more design, and we'll see you then.